Howdy folks, and welcome to another edition of the Smoogleville Workshop. And in this episode we'll be showing you how we built these lovely steps. So the first thing with any project is to plan what you're going to do, what materials you're going to need, build a cut sheet basically. One way I like to do this with bigger projects like the step project is to actually use full-size graph paper. This is 1-inch square graph, and so what I'm going to do, and I'm actually using a real piece of 2x6. This is largely going to be created with 2x6. But there's a couple of tricky things you have to do when you're making stairs. One of them is you've got to build some strings. And so I'm doing this life-size drawing just to make sure that everything's going to work and give me the right height code-wise for the stairs, which is no more than 7 inches. That's the code for the distance between each of the tread boards, all right, the treads. So we've got a 6.5-inch riser plus 1.5 inch thickness on the tread boards, the steps themselves, and so that should give us a fairly good idea. I'm using a real 2x6 here just so I can be confident that the material is going to be this kind of size and I'm measuring everything correctly. And then I'm going to figure out, okay, we're going to make a string out of this, which is going to basically be, let me kind of outline it a bit. And this is partly why I'm doing a big reason why I'm doing this on paper first, is so I know how much lumber to buy in order to build this string. So once I'd managed to get the drawing done, I was able to go and get some lumber, and then I was ready to cut the stair strings, and I was fairly sure they'd be accurate based on the fact that the drawing was a life-size drawing, a life-size representation of what we needed to end up with. So after a little bit of trial and error, I was able to get the actual shape of the stairs drawn onto a 2x12, which is pressure treated, using a roofing square, and that was how I was able to actually get the lines drawn. I used a Sharpie to get a nice strong line, and then I used the skill saw to actually cut those out. Now, just an important safety point here, folks. Whenever you're cutting pressure treated wood, make sure you wear a mask. The chemicals they impregnate into that wood are pretty nasty. And a lot of people don't realize that, and I actually didn't know that until I did a show on, I was actually one of the competitors on one of the All-American Handyman Season 2 episodes with Scott McGillivray and Mike Holmes. And they were very diligent about making sure when we were using pressure treated that we all had to wear masks. And I hadn't actually realized quite how toxic the sawdust from pressure treated wood could be. So always make sure you're wearing a mask. That was a good tip I learned on that show, because I hadn't actually realized till they told me about it. So there you go. Now, if you haven't heard that before, make sure you wear a mask whenever you work with pressure treated wood. Now what's going on here is obviously the circular saw can't quite finish out those cuts, so I'm just getting a nice vicious looking handsaw in there and finishing off those cuts. You could use a bandsaw, but I actually find it quicker to just use a handsaw to finish those off and chop those out after using the spin saw to get in there. So there's how to make some stair strings right there. So having got one of the stair strings created, I used that as a template and used it to mark out the additional strings. I needed 6 in total to complete the project, so I marked those out on the 2x12s. Next, it was time to start working on the structure, and here I'm cutting some 4x4s to create the posts and basically the legs below the steps to support the structure. In this section you can see I'm cutting an angle through that beam, and this will actually take the string for the stairs and support that quite firmly. And I'm now cutting out a square section also for the top of the string, where the steps will actually go in. So this was an interesting cut. Next, I used a chisel to chip out the main sections of the wood that were not needed. I'd put several cuts into this, so it was actually quite easy to cut these out with the chisel there, as you can see. And now that I opened a section of the wood there that I could get into easily, I used the bandsaw to take out the bulk of the material. Just seemed a little quicker than just chiseling at it. And it was time to start assembling the main sections of the structure. A few more notches to cut out to make sure all of the overlapping pieces of timber met up properly. And so, having basically built the thing into kit form, we then disassembled it and loaded it on the truck and got ready to run it out to its new owner's residence. And here we are at our friend Ronald's house, and we're now getting ready to assemble it. Ronald's helping here. He's dug out a leveled area below the window where the steps are to be placed, and now we are putting the steps back in there, as you can see, and making sure that everything's level and ready to go. And once we've managed to get that leveled out, we then place the top timbers on to make the first step and build it out from there. One thing I had anticipated was that the risers were going to be a little tight to fit in between the different steps there. So I took the power planer with me in order to trim off a couple of fractions of an inch. We took about 3/8 off to maybe 1/4 of an inch using the power planer. That was a good tool for that. That worked very well and very quickly got us a nice tight fit with those risers.
Well designed, I can tell you that much.
You know, before you do anything else, I would go ahead and put some shimmies in there, underneath there.
Some shims under the,
Under those, because you've got all that space right there, and it's going to go like this.
It's going to drop, isn't it?
It's going to bow. So I would maybe, like these little pieces of wood here.
Yeah.
Maybe we can cut them or something.
Let me think.
Yeah.
You can hold it. What would make a good shim?
Crystal was right, we needed some shims. I decided to use some of the leftover wood from the guard that was covering the door originally, and I just cut about 1/4 of an inch strip off one side of that, and then I flipped it around actually and took about 1/8 of an inch off the other side. So we had some pressure treated shims that we could place under the legs just to shore up some gaps between the slab stones and the actual legs of the staircase there. And just to finish out the job, we had young Aiken put the caps on the handrail posts.
Uh-oh. Is it going to fit?
So it looks like we'll have to modify that last cap to get that to fit. Young Aiken can't quite get that to work as is, so I cut the side off it and then we gave it to Aiken to allow him to put it back on the top of the post there, and he successfully mounted that, and that really was the conclusion of the project.
Good job.
Nah, you did a great job, buddy. You've been a great help.
Please click the like button if you found this episode helpful, and we'd love to have you as a subscriber, as there's always something interesting going on in the Smoogleville workshop.
Night all.